In the Dominican Republic, security forces repressed medical unions protesting against privatization in the sector and demanding improvements in the healthcare system. Humanitarian Summit begins in Colombia with the presence of President-elect Gustavo Petro. 120 social organizations will present the agenda for the humanization of the armed conflict. In Iraq, demonstrators took over the country's parliament in protest against the appointment of a new prime minister. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. In the Dominican Republic, security forces repressed medical unions protesting against privatization in the sector and demanding improvements of the healthcare system. Police forces threw paper spray and blows at the doctors, sparking clashes, while the head of the Dominican Medical Association, Rufino Senencaba, described the action of the officers as an outrage. During the police intervention, some doctors were pushed against the pavement, while those who managed to get in front of the National Palace were also victims of repression. Doctors mobilized for the opening of hospital facilities, the reinstatement of incentive for health professionals, and to denounce the lack of personnel. On Tuesday, the Panamanian government stated that it will eliminate for a determined period of time import duties on some products of the basic food basket. According to the presidency, the Council of Ministers approved the cabinet decree that eliminates the import duties on 72 food products, a measure that reduces the cost of the basic food basket by up to 30%. The cabinet detailed that the decree will have an extendable term of 6 months and does not include the exemption from payment of the transfer tax on tangible goods and provision of services. These measures are the result of the talks at the single dialogue table established between the government and organizations of the Panamanian Popular Movement, which are mobilizing in parallel to demand the reduction of the price of the basic food basket and against neoliberal policies. In Colombia, over 120 social organizations presented peace agenda to the upcoming government of Gustavo Petro. From the Artisan Square in Bogota, social organizations from all over the country gathered to deliver to the incoming government of President-elect Gustavo Petro a humanitarian agenda. This consists of a proposal for the humanization of the armed conflict in Colombia and is also an input to the objective that the incoming government is pursuing for total peace. Among the main proposals put forward by the organizations is that Petro's government fully implements the peace agreement with the extinct FARC-EP, resumes talks with the ELN, and that other armed actors, especially paramilitary groups such as the Gulf Clan, are brought to justice. The United Nations Security Council expressed its support for the President-elect of Colombia, Gustavo Petro, in the negotiations he is seeking to carry out with armed groups in the country. Through a statement issued by Rosemary DiCarlo, Secretary General for Political Affairs and Peace Building, the United Nations welcomed the President-elect's commitment to deepen the peace process through dialogue. They also stressed that there are still pending challenges to achieve peace and denounced the continuous assassination of social leaders and former FARC combatants who signed the peace agreement agreed in Havana. They also recognized the work of the Special Jurisdiction for Peace, where perpetrators acknowledge their responsibility for crimes committed in the framework of the Colombian armed conflict. The President of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro, received the Vice Prime Minister of Qatar, Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani, at the Miraflores Palace in Caracas. The meeting took place in the context of the strengthening of diplomatic relations between both countries, following the recent visit of the Venezuelan head of state to the country during his Eurasian tour. The President ratified the cooperation ties between the nations, in addition to reviewing the actions to consolidate the ties and strategic alliances. It is worth mentioning that Venezuela and Qatar maintain bilateral agreements in different strategic areas, as well as in joint cooperation and current geopolitical issues. Colombia's Vice President-elect Francia Marquez continues her visit to Brazil as part of her regional tour to strengthen ties with political and social movements. This Wednesday, Marquez continues her visit to the city of Rio de Janeiro with activities and meetings with representatives of popular movements. A monument to Marielle Franco, the city councilor and activist for the rights of Afro-descendants women murdered in 2018, is scheduled to be inaugurated during Wednesday's events in Rio de Janeiro. During the beginning of her tour, Marquez held a meeting with former presidents Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva Silva and Dilma Rousseff in the city of Sao Paulo, where they discussed regional integration, the fight against hunger, racism, and discrimination. Polls in Brazil show former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva in the lead for the presidential race with the support of adolescents and young people. According to a survey conducted by the polling institute Datafolha, Lula da Silva shows a 51% support among adolescents and young people between 16 and 29 years old in 12 capitals, while Bolsonaro shows 20% and Ciro Gomes 12%. Lula has even higher results with young women with a 58% support compared to 16% for Bolsonaro and 10% for Ciro. The results were obtained from a survey of 935 voters in the cities of Sao Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, Belo Horizonte, Salvador, Fortaleza, Recife, Porto Alegre, Curitiba, Goiânia, Brasilia, Manaus, and Belém. We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back to From the South. In Bolivia, the Bolivian Workers' Center, COB, denounced the right-wing plans for a new coup d'etat due to the postponement of the national census to 2024. Through a statement, the organization denounced that the governor of Santa Cruz, supported by the local civic committee, is trying to generate chaos and destabilize the national government. In this respect, the Central Labor Union demanded that the authorities of Santa Cruz join the National Council of Autonomy, stating that if they do not do so, they will call for demonstrations. Representatives stated that they are in a state of emergency and in a state of struggle against seditious people and politicians in order to defend the constitutional government. In this context, Bolivia's President Luis Arce made a statement through his Twitter account in which he highlighted the commitment of the Bolivian Workers' Center. The head of state said the economic reconstruction is not negotiated. We salute the commitment of the Central Obrera Boliviana, aware of the historical moment that the homeland is experiencing, which, with work and unity, return to the path of growth in the midst of an unprecedented international crisis. Finally, Arce added, "We are sure that the Bolivian people will not allow petty interests of privileged groups to try to block the country's growth, seeking to hide their incapacity without technical arguments. Long live the COP, long live the united people." Turkey inaugurated a joint coordination center in Istanbul to monitor the implementation of the grain shipment process from Ukraine. Located inside the big compound of a military university in the city's European side district of Besiktas, the center consists of 20 representatives from Russia, Ukraine, Turkey, and the United Nations, 5 from each party. Operations resume in Ukrainian Black Sea ports of Odessa, Chornomorsk, and Pivdeni, in line with the grain export deal signed last week. Currently, the work is underway to prepare the ports for safe navigation, with military and civilian experts searching for underwater objects and installing special navigation equipment. The Black Sea Grain Initiative, signed respectively by Russia and Ukraine with Turkey under the UN auspice, would allow significant volumes of food and fertilizer exports from the Ukrainian ports in the Black Sea. The German federal government has approved the sale of 100 modern self-propelled howitzers to Ukraine. According to local media, the budget for the production will be at 1.7 billion euros. The German manufacturer plans to start production immediately, but it is not yet clear when the first howitzers will arrive in Ukraine. A modern self-propelled howitzer can shoot at 30 to 40 kilometers depending on the ammunition used. It is considered one of the most advanced howitzers in the world and can fire up to 10 rounds per minute. In Germany also, the strike of ground staff of the Lufthansa airline group affected some 130,000 passengers whose flights were cancelled at the Frankfurt and Munich airports. According to company officials, some 1,100 flights have been cancelled, almost all of the airline's scheduled flights at these two major airports. The influx of passengers to their terminal was minimal, as the company had previously warned those affected of the cancellation of their flights. The strike was called on by the service sector union, Verdi, which unites some 20,000 employees. They are demanding a 9.5% wage increase or an increase of at least €350 per month. In the United Kingdom, over 40,000 railroad workers went on strike to demand better wages. According to the Secretary of the National Railroad Union, Mick Lynch, indicated that around 40,000 workers remain on strike to demand improvements in working conditions. At the same time, several Labour deputies joined the protest and defied the order of the opposition party leadership not to support the strike. In the middle of the demonstration, the Transporters Guild said that the London Underground transportation was not affected by the strike. Hundreds of people have begun receiving the monkeypox vaccine in Barcelona, Spain. The vaccination campaign in Catalonia began last week with a limited number of vaccines. Doctors say they are targeting first at-risk groups such as gay men and transgender women, since the majority of cases have been registered among such patients. Last week, the head of the World Health Organization said the expanding monkeypox outbreak in more than 70 countries was an extraordinary situation that qualifies as a global emergency. It is WHO's highest level of alert, but the designation does not necessarily mean a disease is particularly transmissible or lethal.
I came for a checkup on Friday, and not long afterwards they contacted me to ask if I was interested in getting vaccinated today, and I said obviously yes, because this way I feel reassured. It is a way to stop the spread. We are a group at risk. In the same way that I got vaccinated against COVID. Well, if I got the COVID vaccine, that is a vaccine done in 2 days, I have no doubts about getting this one, which had existed since much longer.
We have more news coming up after a final short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. Hundreds of angry protesters, most of them followers of the Iraqi Shia leader Muqtada al-Sadr, have stormed the parliament building in Baghdad to protest against the nomination for prime minister by Iran-backed parties. No lawmakers were present in parliament when the protesters got into the capital's high-security green zone, home to government buildings and diplomatic missions. The protesters opposed the candidacy of Mohammed Shia al-Sudani, who was formally nominated to lead the country on Monday by the Coordination Framework, in the largest Shiite alliance in the Iraqi parliament. His nomination followed the mass resignation of al-Sadr's parliamentary bloc, a group of over 70 lawmakers who withdrew from the governing body last month in an apparent show of force after a month of political stalemate. The Chinese government has warned of serious consequences if United States House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi were to proceed with her visit to Taiwan. In a news conference, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Chao Lijian urged the U.S. to respect their promise of not supporting Taiwan's independence and warned that Pelosi's trip, if it were to happen, will further increase tensions between Washington and Beijing. In the meantime, the spokesperson for the Ministry of National Defense, Colonel Tan Kefei, said if the U.S. side insists on going ahead, the Chinese military will not sit idle and will take strong measures to fight back any external interference and separatist attempts for Taiwan independence. The United States House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi's initiative to travel to Taiwan has raised tensions on the U.S. political scene. While the politician's plan is encouraged by her Republican peers, President Joe Biden seems to favor a greater dialogue with Beijing. So far, the White House and the President's office have not challenged Pelosi's initiative, though they have not publicly opposed to it either. Cutting China's growing influence has been on the top of the foreign policy agenda of Biden administration. Yet the U.S. head of state has sought to prevent tensions from escalating unnecessarily. All this occurs as the White House prepares for another call between Biden and his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping, a conversation the U.S. president said is expected this week despite his COVID-19 diagnosis. North Korea warned that the United States and South Korea will face unprecedented security challenges if they don't stop their hostile military pressure campaign against the North, including joint military drills. The latest warning came as Washington and Seoul prepared to expand their upcoming summertime training following the North's run of missile tests this year. According to Cho Jin, Deputy Director General of the Institute of Disarmament and Peace, said that Washington and Seoul's joint military drills this year are driving the Korean Peninsula to the brink of war. He accused U.S. and South Korean officials of plotting to discuss the deployment of U.S. nuclear strategic assets during another joint drill set to begin next month. The United Nations Command hosted the 69th Armistice Agreement commemoration ceremony on Wednesday at the War Memorial of Korea. On July 27, 1953, a delegation from the United States, UN Command, North Korea, and China met at the border at Panmunjom, where they signed an agreement to end open hostilities and created a buffer zone between North and South. The Korean War began on June 25, 1950, when North Korean forces crossed the 38th parallel into South Korea. 2 days later, the UN Security Council in a resolution recommended urgent military measures and called for a coalition of nations to repel the invasion. The United States was designated to lead the UN Command, which at the time was composed of 22 nations. In Chile, a strong earthquake was recorded in the northern area of the country. According to preliminary information, the movement had a magnitude of 6.2 and was registered 32 kilometers northeast of Calama, while the National Seismological Service reported that the epicenter was at a depth of 123 kilometers. The movement was felt in the regions of Tarapacá, Antofagasta, and Atacama, and so far no injuries or material damage were reported. According to the authorities, the characteristics of the earthquake do not have the necessary conditions to generate a tsunami in the coast of Chile. In Pakistan, the National Disaster Management Authority reported that floods resulting from recent rainfall have left more than 330 people dead. Authorities confirmed that most of the damage and victims were recorded in the provinces of Baluchistan, Punjab, and Sindh, bordering with Afghanistan. According to official reports, some 370 people were affected by the rains, while more than 8,600 houses were damaged. Some 50 bridges connecting different parts of the country were also destroyed, resulting in a total of 650 kilometers of damaged roads. teleSUR English continues to grow. Its signal now reaches Europe. You can order from your cable dealer or tune it yourself. These parameters that you see on screen are in place since July 1st, and quite soon further changes will be implemented for the signals in the Middle East and Africa. Now more than ever, the world connects to us and our stories are heard in other faraway nations. This news multi-platform will continue providing truthful content to oppose the hegemonic media's narrative and our faithfulness to our audience. And we have come to the end of this news brief. Remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For teleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.